The Calgary Flames remove the interim tag off of Geoff Ward, and he now becomes the 20th head coach in Flames history. Eric, surprised at this move, or did you see this one coming?
No, not surprised at all. To me, he was the obvious candidate from the start based on the success that he had with this team when he took them over. He's familiar with the group. He's really empowered this group. He's got a great relationship with them. I think, all the boxes that Brad Treliving needed to have checked were checked off. And Treliving went a little step further and said all the time that he spent in the bubble with him on a daily basis really solidified what was his previous belief, which is he's the best man for the job.
Do you think there was a thought of maybe going somewhere else for a head coach? There are a number of big names out there. Do you think they considered it?
You have to consider it. I mean, Gerard Gallant, Peter Laviolette, Bruce Boudreau, Mike Babcock, these are impressive names. Some of these guys are Hall of Fame material. You had to consider it, but, ownership for this team has never had a penchant for spending big money on big name coaches. And I don't see that changing in the economy that the NHL and this province are facing. None of them would have had the familiarity that Geoff Ward has worked 2 years at building with this team and moving this team along as it progresses towards being an eventual contender. So I think that certainly he wouldn't say whether or not he'd spoken to other people, which to me tells me that he did speak to a couple other people, but that in no way means that he didn't think Geoff Ward was the guy from day one. You have to go and do your due diligence. I think he probably did that with one or two of those names, but at the end of the day, he kept coming back to the guy who he thought deserved to continue on in his quest to turn this team into a contender.
A turbulent season, to say the least, Eric. When you think about the way Geoff Ward was brought into the situation to the way it finished in the hub, what did you notice about now the head coach of the Calgary Flames as he seemingly took everything in stride and really preached as you say, an empowerment with his players?
Well, to me, he acted like he'd been there before, even though he hasn't been there before. I mean, this guy's got an extensive coaching history as a head coach outside of the National Hockey League, but a long-time assistant in Boston where he learned so many things about composure, leadership, empowerment, and I think he put all those into play. When this team had the Bill Peters incident hit them and hit them hard, they were really reeling. They were 5 or 6 games below 500. He led them on 7 straight wins at a time when a lot of people thought their season was probably over. And he did that with a calmness. They battened down the hatches, and they just looked internally. And he was just so calm and cool. It's hard to believe when you interview him, you see him in a scrum, you see him behind the bench, that he hadn't been a head coach in the National Hockey League before. So I think that composure and all those years an assistant and a coach in other leagues really, steered him to this point, and he was ready for it. He wasn't in over his head.
And finally, he seemed to think that this team is close. Now, there will be critics on the outside and people who doubt the way that this team is going, but he says he feels this team is close. He also made some comparables to when he was tasked with identifying a leadership group in Boston before the group, as we now know it, really took off. He's trying to do that here as well.
Yeah, he spoke endlessly today about a team-building event in Banff that the team had to start the season here in Calgary, and he likened it to some of the team-building exercises they had in Boston, and when they really wanted to identify who could be the future leaders of this team. And he said it really served the Bruins well, obviously, and it served the Calgary Flames well this year as well. So this is a guy who really is calculated. He's cerebral. He's well-spoken. There are so many reasons to believe that when he says they're close, people should believe it. And of course, most coaches are going to say that when they're hired, that this team is close. Why wouldn't you say that? But he knows intimately about this team, and he's got his finger on the pulse. And I really do think, all things being equal, even if they were considering another big-name coach, when you factor in the familiarity that Geoff Ward has had, and most importantly, the success, they were 10 games above 500 with him at the helm. You can't ignore that. You need to reward it. They did the right thing today.
They also had a 3-1 qualifying round, opening round victory over the Winnipeg Jets, and were 11 seconds away from potentially going up 3-1 against the Dallas Stars. And now Geoff Ward is the head coach, officially, of the Calgary Flames.